And now I'll be rewriting a seminar that I took in my college years. It was a voluntary seminar. You know, during the time I happened to be hanging out a lot at the LGBTQ club, because that just happened to be who my friends were at the time. Going through, I had a pretty, I guess you'd call it, liberal education, and yeah, so the club, the LGBTQ club, was running a seminar, and the title of the seminar was Homosexuality in the Bible. So I went to this seminar, and this was so many years ago, but to this day, the seminar still bothers me, because, well, my my experience in this seminar was that what they do is they take my Bible characters, and then they just stamp them as queer. So, for instance, this is what I learned, right, in the seminar that I registered for, right, it's way back in Stony Brook, way back in the day. So they took the people running this seminar, who was like, they were affiliated with the administration of the LGBTQ, and for homosexuality in the Bible seminar. That was what it was called. They took David and Jonathan, the story of David and Jonathan, and then they stamped them as queers, because they took a scripture, something about David loving Jonathan more than women, you know, and then they took Ruth and Naomi, like, they didn't say, it wasn't like an outright statement that they're queer, but they left the suggestion out there that there was something going, that there was some kind of homosexual element going on in the story of Ruth too. And I'll give the admin, you know, credit for this much, for raising, you know, the important topic of where, if at all, does the gay gene exist in the Bible. You know, and everybody wants advocates, whatever whatever club you belong to. It's always nice to have advocates. So but there wasn't a very intellectual seminar. It was brief, and it was pretty clear what they were doing. They were taking all the Bible characters to use them as their advocates to support their agenda. So, but the good thing about the seminar was that it raised the important question of where, if at all, does the gay gene exist in the Bible. So I could have totally run that seminar way better than they did. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite the seminar. And the question raised in the seminar was the nature of the relationship between David and Jonathan. Now, mind you, I'm going to totally use my creative literary license on this. So you don't need to come at me and say, oh, that's not in the Bible, or that's not word for word. I know. I'm going way in between the lines with this one. All right. So I'll rewrite the seminar. For those of you who did take that seminar. I could definitely run that seminar much better. And the question was, where, if at all, does the gay gene exist in the Bible? Is the question that's raised in this kind of seminar. So here's what really happened. First off, if you want to just outright stamp David and Jonathan as a queer identity, you're absolutely wrong, because David has a dominant procreative instinct. I mean, look at all of the wives he has in his harem. Okay? He has a very, very dominant procreative instinct. Such a dominant procreative instinct, which some would categorize as a straight identity, but it's more it's not so simple as just drawing a line between the humanity. These are the straight people, these are not the straight people. human sexuality is more complex than that. So we all do have a recessive fluid gay trait. So here's what really happened with David and Jonathan, because I do understand to some degree the point that some people are making by taking that scripture, that David loved Jonathan more than women. So, mind you, I'm totally using my creative literary license, all right? So you could count this one as fiction, right? So David, you have to remember when David was very young on the battlefield, where we're discussing the recessive fluid gay trait of David. I absolutely stand against the ridiculous theory that David was a queer. He obviously had a procreative identity. So that's just an obvious attempt to manipulate him, this character, in order to have him as your part of your support network system. Let's try to have all right. Let's try to get down to the truth. Most of you are familiar with the scripture about David and his love for Jonathan, because this is what's used. All right. In the theoretical realm, one questioning whether or not David, what his identity was. So here's what happened in terms of David and Jonathan and their love for each other. So when David was young on the battlefield, he was working for King Saul. Remember, at this point, David did not have a wife. David did not have a wife at this point, okay? If it was a genetic possibility for the species of man to live without the species of woman, then the Darwinian code survival of species would be shattered. Therefore, we do not exist. Naturally, the recessive fluid gay trait is activated in a hard, cold work zone like the battlefield, especially with King Saul as your boss. Because King Saul was dangling his daughter Michal as the trophy wife. And every time David won another battle, David thought now he's going to be able to at last go have a honeymoon with his wife. Well, it didn't happen. So you can imagine what degree of psychological torture David is going through at this point. To such a degree that his recessive fluid gay trait is being activated. Naturally so. Because he can't live without a woman, and King Saul keeps playing these mean tricks. It's like he dangles his daughter and then she disappears. King Saul was using his daughter as bait to keep David on the hard, cold battlefield. And at this point, David is under such a degree of psychological torture that, yes, the recessive fluid gay trait is activated. So sure, if Jonathan dressed up in some garb or whatever to appear more feminine, you know, maybe David would not have known the difference. So whether or not David and Jonathan had a degree of intimacy on a sexual level, we can leave that open. But regardless, it doesn't change the factor that it's a genetic fact that King David has a healthy chromosomal identity. And what I mean by that is the procreative or hetero identity is dominant, and the gay trait is what it is, what it should be, what it is naturally by genetic design, recessive. So whether or not David and Jonathan had a fling is not really relevant in terms of his identity. Because if they did, because under the circumstances, David's recessive fluid gay trait was activated during this time period where he was overdue to be married. And anyway, I told you about the tricks that King Saul was playing with Michal, which could be psychological torture for David. So whether or not during that season in his life, David and Jonathan had a fling, it doesn't matter in the sense that it does not change his identity. It doesn't determine his identity. You could not use that fling as, it would be totally false to use that fling as your backup for your theory that supposedly David and Jonathan were gay. So I hope I made that point pretty clear. I hope I made that point pretty clear, that there's a world of a difference between David and Jonathan hypothetically having a fling that's short-lived and over and buried, versus David and Jonathan going off onto another planet to engage in a gay marriage.